Now, if you're following along with me, some of the windows may not appear. Most of the windows you can get access to using this View menu. And as you can see, there's a number of windows that are listed, including Solution Explorer and the Properties window. So those are the two windows that I'm going to be talking about right now. But there's a lot of other ones, and there's various other windows as well. So as you can see, there's a large number of windows that you can use within Visual Studio. So again, this is the main location for opening those windows if they don't show within your development environment. All right, so I've arranged the Solution Explorer and Properties to be visible at the same time. So the Solution Explorer here is the main window, the main tool for working with projects and individual files. In addition to displaying the various files that make up your project, the window also has a direct connection to the underlying file system. If you rename a file in a project, the IDE renames it on the disk. If you delete a file from a project, it deletes it from a disk. So this is real-time working with the actual files of your application. Now, the good news is that deleting a file in the Solution Explorer window sends the file to the Windows Recycle bin so that it can be recovered if you need it to be. If you want only to remove the file from the project but to leave the file intact on the disk, you can right-click on the file here within the window and select Exclude from Project. In that case, it'll no longer be included with the project. This code file won't be compiled when I build the project, but it'll still be available. So I don't want to do that because I need that program.cs file, but that's an option. Very commonly, the Visual Studio project templates will add files that aren't included that are necessary for some sort of design time feature, but aren't necessary to build the project. And so they'll be there, they'll be within a folder within the project folders, but not be included within the file. But in fact, let me go ahead and I'm going to exclude that. And as you can see, it now disappears. It opens the previous file, the app.config, because I don't have any other files open. But I can still see the file here. Notice that it's kind of grayed out. And then I can come back here and include the file in the project once again, and then hide all the files. Okay, so be aware of those subtleties. If you know a file is there but you don't see it, you may need to display all of the project files. Okay, so I have program.cs selected. Notice that down here in the Properties window, this shows the properties for that file. So as I navigate around to different objects, the Properties window always shows what's currently selected. Okay, so I'll select that again and program.cs. Notice that when I select it, I just single-clicked it, I get this preview window here on the right side tab. So it's a preview. This is real handy for just taking a quick look at different files. But if I actually want to open it and use it in the code editor, I double-click on it, and then the tab appears over here on the left, and it's no longer just a preview. It's now the file open, ready for me to make changes to it. Okay, so I'll back over here into program.cs, show the objects here. There's the file name right there. I can change the file right here and call it my console app.cs. And I have to include the extension. It's a C# file, and that's how Visual Studio recognizes a C#. Saying you're renaming a file, would you also like to perform a rename in this project of all references to the code element program? And in this case, yes. And so what it's going to do is it's no longer going to have all these program names. It's going to change that to my console app. Had I said no, it wouldn't have changed those names right there. There are times when you do and don't want to do that. All right, also notice that the light bulb was flashing. This has different actions that you can perform. And so you can see in the little tooltip there, light bulbs like this one show you potential fixes to issues in your code. Click on them or press blah, blah, blah. And so if I look at this, remove unnecessary usings. Okay, that's a refinement I'm not going to take right now because I haven't written any code. But that just refers to cleaning up this list of usings. And I'll talk more about those in another part of the course. Okay, and then also notice that it changed the file on disk. If I went into Windows Explorer, that file is now named My Console App. So that's the new name that I changed right there. By the way, I can also change it here. If I single click on it again, notice that it's highlighted, and I can change the name to something else if I choose to. Okay, but I'll leave it at My Console App for now. Okay, so normally when you create an application, you specify the name of the project in the New Project window, and that's what I did when I created this application. And this also sets the name of the assembly that contains the project and the default namespace of the project. But you can also specify or change the assembly name and the default namespace from the project's property page. So that is not the properties window, it's the project's property page. And I'll select that, and that opens up an entirely different window. All right, I'm going to slide these out of the way so we can use the full real estate here. Okay, so there's the assembly name, which is the name of the project that I gave it when I created the project. And then that's the only custom namespace, so it also sets the default namespace. So anytime I create a new file or create new objects, it'll automatically put them within the console application 1 namespace. All right, and then there's a lot of other project properties that you can set here as well. Okay, a little bit more about namespaces first. So I haven't talked about namespaces yet, will throughout the course, but code in your own projects exists within a namespace, just like the code within the .NET framework. .NET framework is all contained within the system namespace as the top level namespace, but your projects also have their own namespace. And by default, the namespace associated with your code is the name that you assigned to the project. Visual Studio really has no other basis to call it anything else, so it uses the project name, which again is a reason to choose a good project name that makes sense. Okay, but you can change the namespace. All right, so here's the assembly name, and the default name, again, is the name of the project, and I'm going to change this to My Console App. So you might start to guess that I probably would have been better advised to set the project name to My Console App in the first place, because then I wouldn't have to go in and make all these changes, if that's the name that I'm going to use. And that's what I generally do in all of the rest of the courses. But I want to show you how to be able to change this. So the assembly name is now going to be My Console App, so this is going to compile out to myconsoleapp.exe. And then I also want to change the default namespace to My Console Apps. Nope, I'm sorry, just My Console App. Same as the project name, or the assembly name. They don't need to be the same, but I'm making the same here. So again, what this is going to do is this is going to set the namespace, the default namespace, for any additional classes that I add to the project. Now, it's important to understand that changing the default namespace here doesn't change the namespace of any existing objects. So I'm overall doing a wholesale change of namespaces, then I would need to change it in my code as well. But fortunately, Visual Studio has some refactoring tools that help with making that kind of a change as well. Okay, so I want to save my changes. I can either save just this file, I can save all files, or I can use the File, Save Selected Items, or Save All. So I generally just default to the Save All toolbar button there. And now my changes are written out to all of the disk files. Okay, and then I can close this window. I can right-click on it and select Close, Close All Documents. This has a lot of options, but generally if I just want to close the window, I'll just click on the X there. And that takes me back to the next program file that's currently open. And again, it's now called myconsoleapp.cs. Okay, so notice that my namespace of this existing code file is still console application 1. Nothing that I've done so far has caused a change to that. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do next. But imagine that I changed the name of my assembly and the default namespace, and I want to change the namespaces of my project. But imagine that I have already created multiple code files. Maybe I have a couple dozen code files that are part of the project. They're all in the namespace console application 1. I write all this code, I do all this work, and then I realize that was the wrong namespace. That namespace just makes absolutely no sense. So you could do it manually. Visual Studio has the ability to do search and replaces throughout. You can search individually, change them one by one, and so forth. But C# and Visual Studio also have a number of what are called refactoring features that automate a lot of this kind of work. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use the rename refactoring, which is one of many refactorings that you can use in order to do a wholesale change of names. Now the nice thing about this is that if I've declared a variable called console application 1 and it's embedded within some method deep within my code, the refactoring process is smart enough to recognize that if I change the namespace, a namespace is not the same thing as the name of a variable or the name of a class. So if I change the namespace name, it's only going to change the namespace names, that namespace name throughout the project, but not other things that are named the same thing but are clearly different objects. Okay, so I'm going to right-click on this, and we have this rename option. There's often more refactorings under quick action under these light bulb things, but in this case, rename is so common that it's on the right-click menu. And that opens this small renaming window in the upper right-hand corner of the code editor. And then it also highlights the name in this different color to indicate that now it's going to be the subject of a refactoring. All right, there's a few options here. I want to preview the changes before they're made, so I'll click on that. But I could also include comments. If maybe I had comments in various places that say, the console application 1 namespace is where I stored all of the XYZ. I have another comment about the namespace and so forth. I can include to change this string in comments as well as within strings that are embedded within my application. I don't want to do either of those. Generally, those are a little bit dangerous. You can see the previews if you select this option. But in this case, I just want to preview the changes. I don't want to change any strings where they may happen to appear. Okay, so now I can change this to my console app. Okay, so that's going to be the new namespace. And I can either press enter, which I'll do, or click the apply button. So I'll click enter. And now, because I checked that box, I get this preview window, and I can see all of the places where it's going to make the change. Now in this case, very simple application, only appears one place in one code file, but I can select these and see what is going to be changed. And then if I need, if it looks, oh my gosh, I forgot, I really don't want to change the namespace here or some other place or whatever, then I can back off. I can cancel out of this and do something different. But in this case, I'll go ahead and press or click on apply. And now that name is changed. That namespace name is changed throughout my application. So again, simple application. It was nonsensical for me to use the rename refactoring. Only appears one place. But again, if I had dozens of code files, they're now all done. Okay, so very, very handy feature of Visual Studio.